Good morning, everyone. From this presentation, we will be talking about three types of fluid flows that occur in open channels. And we will be discussing how each of the flow type is identified by observing open channel stream flows. In the outline of the presentation, we will first take a look at the classification of open channel flows. Then each of the group member will discuss the flow types identified by them as uniform flow, gradually varied flow, and rapidly varied flow. The presentation will be concluded with the summary at the end. Starting off, let's first understand what an open channel is. An open channel is any flow of liquid in channels open to the atmosphere or partially filled conduits with the presence of liquid-gas interface. So these open channel flows can be classified into mainly three types according to the flow depth and velocity variation along the channel. Those are uniform flow, gradually varied flow, and rapidly varied flow. Here you can see a graphical representation of each of the flow type.
First, I tell you what is an uniform flow. When the flow depth and velocity remains constant along the same distance, we can say that open channel is an uniform flow. This figure shows you some example for a uniform flow. Uniform flows are long straight sections of channels with constant slope, constant roughness, and constant cross section. And now I'm going to show you a sample video captured from the canal near to the FOE building. Um, in this video, you can see that smooth and constant water flow. You can see there are equal flow depths along the canal. Then I'm going to tell you how we identify this flow as an uniform flow. First, we measured the flow depth at 25 centimeter intervals. For that task, we use wooden sticks and measure the flow depth. From the result we obtain, there is not significant variance in the depth at 25 centimeter intervals. Then I'm going to tell you when I posted this video to our group, my colleagues give their opinions regarding this flow type. Someone says that uniform flows occur when the channel slope, cross-section, and surface roughness remains constant. From the sample video we have captured, there was a constant trapezoidal cross-section. So we can say that uniform flow there was occur, and also there can be seen that the same type of granular material consisting the bottom bed of the canal. So we can assume that the surface roughness also constant.
The flow type I identified is gradually varied flow. Before talking about the identification of the flow type, let's take a look at what a gradually varied flow is. Gradually varied flow is typically a steady, non-uniform flow where the depth of flow, or we can say the water surface elevation, gradually decrease over a long distance along the channel. Simultaneously, the velocity of the flow also gradually changes with respect to the depth. The most common places where we can easily identify a gradually varied flow is before and after a place where rapidly varied flow can be noticed, most commonly near hydraulic jumps or obstacles along the direction of flow. In this case, gradually varied flow is specifically seen between a uniform flow and rapidly varied flow. So here I have included a video of the gradually varied flow that we observed. Also, a gradually varied flow could typically occur in a prismatic channel with a very small bottom slope. Now let's move on to the identification of this flow type. While we were observing open channel stream flows for different flow types, we noticed a drain which runs by the parade ground, giving a noticeable rapidly varied flow due to an obstruction in the flow. Since gradually varied flow is more likely to occur before a rapidly varied flow, the flow length was checked for gradually varied flow. With the help of dry wooden sticks, depths of water at every 25 centimeter intervals were measured. Even though noticeable variations of depth were not observed, it was clearly noticed that the water profile above the bottom bed has a gradual change in elevation. Since the flow depth were noticed to reduce along the direction of flow, it was determined that the flow has a drop-down curve. Drop-down curve. Accordingly, since dy over dx is a negative value, the flow is further classified as a supercritical flow. After presenting the identification to the group members for evaluation, here are some of the important comments they made. Gradually varied flow typically occurs along a long length of channel, so taking depth measurements along a long length with large intervals would show clear variations of water surface profile. A gradually varied flow can not only can occur due to an obstruction in the flow path, but also it can occur due to change in bottom slope or cross-sectional area. So after considering the comments from the group members, the depth measurements were retaken in 0.5 meter intervals up to 5 meter long length of the depth. Through these observations, a much noticeable variation in water surface elevation were noticed.
Talking about the rapidly varied flow. So first, the rapidly varied flow is a type of non-uniform open channel flow where the fluid depth changes rapidly over a small reach of the channel. So as you can see in the picture, for a small change of the depth within a uh, in a rapidly varied flow, the depth changes drastically with the compared to the length. So it can be observed near the inlets and outlets of culverts and also wherever hydraulic jumps occur. Talking about the identification of the flow, before that, this is a video of the rapidly varied flow we observed in the canal in KDU. So as you can see, there's a sudden depth change in the flow. So considering this, for identification, we identified this as a rapidly varied flow because the depth changes significantly with the length and also considering the change in the velocity. So finally, talking in summary, we talked about three main flow types that could occur in an open channel, namely normal flow, gradually varied flow, and rapidly varied flow. So normal flow has a constant depth, while gradually varied flow has gradual variations in the flow, and finally rapidly varied flow with drastic changes in flow depth. So open channels within the KDU premises were observed for different types of flows, and each flow type was identified through observations by each of the group members. So identification of flow types were then evaluated by other group members by commenting on the determinations, and the comments were then considered in making the corrections in the identification of the flow type. So I hope uh, this presentation gives you an understanding about the fluid flow types of the